want. The example I used earlier today in the Al Jazeera documentary that's being shot is one I'm going to use once again. Zohran Kwame Mamdani. Zohran Mamdani is a 34-year-old brown African Muslim socialist who has dedicated a good chunk of his activism early on to anti-Zionism. Okay? New York has a significant population of Jewish voters. And yet, the majority of Jews in New York voted for Zohran Kwame Mamdani. Now, does this mean that New York Jews are anti-Zionist in nature? Well, I would like to think so, but seemingly that's not the case, as evidenced by the new polls that came out recently. New polls that came out recently that showed that when polled, New York Jews, 70% of New York Jews had sympathies that were either strongly with Israel or somewhat with Israel, as opposed to strongly with Palestinians or somewhat with Palestinians. 70% of New York Jews strongly still or somewhat still sympathize with Israel over the Palestinians. Okay? Now hold on. Before you say, yikes, oh my God, that's crazy. That was my first reaction as well. That shocked me a little bit. Okay? But the reason why I'm bringing that up is because that means that there were New York Jews who still either strongly or somewhat sympathize with Israel after 22, 23 months of fucking genocide, still looked at the brown Muslim anti-Zionist and said, I'm voting for that guy. What does this mean? That means two things. Number one, Israel obviously is not the number one priority for New York Jews that have sympathies with Israel. That's clear. And this is something that we knew already. I talked about this before about, Jews in the United States of America are not Israeli. If they were, they would live in Israel. There's plenty of fucking benefits to living in Israel as a Jewish person, but they still choose to live in America because they're Americans, okay, first and foremost. That's number one, okay? It's not the highest priority. But number two, and this is even more important, even New York Jews that care about Israel looked at a guy like Zohran and said, you know what I care about more? Fast and free buses and a fucking rent freeze. That's the point. That's why you gotta fucking focus on the issues. That's why you have to push for issues. That's why you have to say, I am going to be a fucking fighter for the shit that you care about. I'm going to improve your goddamn material circumstances. That's it. If you look at the numbers, 74% of New York Jews say they strongly or somewhat sympathize with Israelis over Palestinians, and yet Zohran won the majority of Jews in the New York Democratic primary. This means that there were New York Jews who are like, I strongly or somewhat sympathize with the Israelis. This motherfucker hates Israelis. This motherfucker hates Israel. I'm still voting for his ass. Why? Because they were like, I want fast and free buses. I want a rent freeze. I want the shit that he's pushing for. Okay? People make these calculations every fucking day. You have to present them with something that they want, and you have to communicate that you are going to be a fighter for those issues. This is what Democrats never do. They are the good things are not possible party. And that's a horrible party to be. That's a horrible position to be in. Because on the other side, you got, we're going to fuck shit up party. You got the, you're angry and you're right to be angry party. You got, you're angry and you're right to be angry, which is why you should be angry at the Mexicans party. And in the absence of any sort of counter narrative against that, when you cannot be well defined on issues that will greatly improve the living standards of every single fucking American, they can just present you as a silly bitch party that only cares about giving bottom surgeries to Guatemalan transgender prisoners. That's it. That's how you fucking lost. That's why you lost the goddamn election. And it's so frustrating to see people like Ezra Klein, who do have a lot of fucking motion in the Democratic Party, still present this alternative that, like, we just simply didn't go right enough. We didn't go right enough to win these voters. You cannot win culture war issues against the Republican Party on the boundaries that they've created. They made the fucking playing game so they can win. They can always go further right. You can't outflank the Republicans on racism. And the question also remains, should you outflank the Republicans on racism? I say no. It blows my mind that there are still so many well-educated liberals who keep pushing this fucking argument. Like, we got to expand the tent to the races. It's like, yeah, we do, but just not in the way that you think. Of course we have to get votes from racists. I agree. A lot of Americans are racist. Of course we got to get votes from transphobes. I agree. A lot of Americans are transphobic. You just don't do that by being transphobic, because no transphobic person is going to vote for you. They're going to go for the real transphobia party. They're going to go for the real racism party. You get them on your side by offering them things that they need. This is how democracy fucking works. And little by little, you convince them that this transphobia shit's also irrelevant to your life, okay? You underestimate how many just want racism and transphobia? I'm not doing that at all. Of course, there are a bunch of fucking delusional, hateful losers out there who are like, no, I want fucking transphobia more than anything else. Who gives a shit? The number of people who are primarily invested in that, in the absence of any sort of Democrat messaging that they can align with, seems consequential. But if there was a left flank party that was simply saying, dude, Medicare for all, that's what I'm about. I'm going to give that to you. I'm going to give that to you no matter what. A lot less people would find themselves being singularly focused on transphobia, because they would recognize that that shit doesn't actually move the needle. That shit doesn't actually improve their lives at all. Ironically enough, this is a limitation with Ta-Nehisi's assessment as well, because he too is also a liberal, but I don't know where he is on this issue nowadays. Says, so much ground on basic human rights has been lost in the past 10 years thanks to the Democratic Party consistently trying and failing to woo Republican voters. Notice he didn't put anything in the table that might materially harm him in any ways, a losing strategy. Also, as far as like tacking to the right from his position, there is a gimme right there. It's called saying fuck Israel. And I've never heard Ezra Klein say Democrats need to be on the fucking mountaintops screaming about how Israel sucks dick, okay? Because that's the broadest coalition that you can win over, for the record. And I hope Ta-Nehisi actually brings that up to him, because honestly, that's a fast pass right there. That's easy street, baby. You come out and you're like, we're the fuck Israel party. We are going to decouple American foreign policy from Israel. Enough is enough. Whoo, god damn. Think about how much you would win in that process. Why does Ezra never talk about that? I don't know. He alludes to it every now and then, but it's a very limited approach. Now, what's interesting, once again, is that abortion doesn't impact him. And yet he has no issues presenting pro-life Democrats as an alternative in red states to win elections. But what's really interesting about that is those exact same states that he presents as like pro-life Democrats potentially winning a broader coalition of right-wing voters are states where they literally fucking voted on ballot measures to protect abortion enshrined in the state constitution. So he's just wrong on every aspect. It blows my fucking mind. Pro-life is perhaps the worst position that he could align himself on, to say we need to expand the umbrella by bringing back pro-life Democrats. Pro-life is not a winning position, it's a losing position. At least he could have done like the classic, everybody hates trans people. We need anti-trans Democrats or some shit, which I still think is fucked up. Which I still think it's unacceptable and fucked up. Because you're not going to win any favors with anybody by doing that, as I've assured you, as I've explained to you already. Because there's always more anti-trans messaging that will come from the other side. This is at the heart of the problem This is the problem at the core of the Democratic Party, okay? This is why they lose elections. When you cave to your opposition's framing on culture war narratives, you just legitimize their argument.
I have a tradition. I have ancestry. I have heritage. What that means is that I do whatever I do within the time that I have in my life, whatever time I'm gifted with. And much of what I do is built on what other people did before then. And then after that, I leave the struggle where I leave it. And then hopefully it's in a better place. Oftentimes it's not. That's the history, in fact. And then my progeny pick it up and they keep it going. I am descended from people who in their lifetime fought with all their might for the destruction of chattel slavery in this country. And they never saw it. They never saw it. In my personal belief system, they died in, defeat, in darkness, And so I guess the privilege that I draw out of this, the honor that I draw out of this, is not that things will necessarily be better in my lifetime, but that I will make the contribution that I am supposed to make. The fact of the matter is, as horrifying as, that the killing of Charlie Kirk was, and as horrifying as the feeling is, this moment that we are in, an era of political violence, and I don't want to sound flip here.
Not to be mean, but Ezra's problem is whiteness. Oh, dude, I mean, not to get all like 2016 BuzzFeed with it, but like, yes. No, 100%. Because like, I have noticed that like the broad majority of like the liberal commentariat that had Ezra's style reflections on Charlie Kirk's background and Charlie Kirk's political output do unironically come from that same that same inability to address like the dehumanization that came along with Charlie Kirk's narratives. I mean, it's true. It's true. Now, this doesn't mean that there aren't white people who also had the same opinion of Charlie Kirk as Ta-Nehisi does. Of course, there are, myself included. But like, it is clear that I think it's an inherently reactionary tendency to refuse. It's an inherently reactionary tendency to like refuse to think about the impact that this has on groups of marginalized communities that you are so easily discarding. Okay? That's what this is.
Political violence is the norm for Black experience in this country. It just is. I don't even mean like the Malcolm X, Martin Luther King variety of it, right? Which is the norm too. You would be hard pressed to have a conversation with a Black person in this country that is a descendant of slavery and not have them be able to reach maybe right here or to tell you themselves, look, my uncle, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, they lived in a small town in Mississippi, in Tennessee, in Alabama. They got into some sort of dispute with a white man, and either they were lynched or we had to run. Political violence runs through us. It is our heritage. Is that good? No. Do we valorize it? Absolutely not. Do we minimize it? Absolutely not. But a life free of it is not a thing that's really in reach in my time.
Sometimes I think that having a historical scope that wide can make the present too deterministic.
Mm.
So to me, I look at the last, 8, 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what I see having happened is we, the coalition I am in, the things I believe in, lost ground. And people determinedly worked to make that so. Charlie Kirk worked to make that so successfully, right? I think that when he began going to college campuses and putting out a sign at a table, what he was eventually going to build was not obvious, right? I think he worked. I think he was a successful political actor. And I think that from when in 2016, we lost to Donald Trump the first time, very narrowly, won the popular vote, right? And then in 2020, we almost lost to him and began seeing we were losing a bunch of voters we thought we were fighting for, right? Losing more working class voters, losing non-white voters, right? Something was changing, but we won, so okay. And then in 2024, we really got our asses handed to us. And we let a much more dangerous form of politics fully erupt. And I think that reflects strategic decisions they made. I think it reflects decisions we made. So I think for me, it's not enough to say, we lost, there are backlashes, sometimes you lose. I think it requires like a very fundamental rethinking, like a disciplined strategic rethinking of what have we been doing? Why are people preferring this to us? And I do think that is like, it opens up into something more that I think that.
Yes, I agree. I agree. Nothing he said is wrong. What's wrong is his solution. Yeah, of course, in the aftermath of a fucking major political defeat against a party that has historically, in the last 3 decades, never won a fucking a popular election victory, with one exception. Of course, it's important to reflect on it. You're not really saying much when you say that, though. You're saying that there must be an autopsy conducted. Yeah, no shit. The issue that I have with Ezra Klein is not that he wants to conduct an autopsy on how the Democrats lost. The issue that I have with Ezra Klein is that his autopsy is wrong.
There is a practice of politics here that, in a narrow sense, I was talking about Kirk, but in a broad sense reflects to something that I thought was going to be an argument stretching across the show for like a year, right? I think more of it came out in this than I'd intended, probably. But I think in many ways we've stopped doing politics. We've written a lot of people off. And in writing them off, we are losing, and we are unable to protect ourselves, unable to protect them, just unable to make good change in the world.
Can you say more about that, writing them off, please?
Yeah. Why don't we start it here if we want to talk about writing them off? I've been obsessing recently for a piece I've been writing about the Hillary Clinton deplorables comment, and I want to play it.
You know, to just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right?
She was right. She was fucking right. She was goddamn right. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm joking. You shouldn't. Sometimes, even if you're right, you shouldn't say those things. Also, especially if you're someone as patently unlikable as Hillary Clinton, you should never say those things.
They're racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it. And unfortunately, there are people like that. And he has lifted them up. He has given voice to their websites that used to only have 11,000 people, now have 11 million. He tweets and retweets. They're offensive, hateful, mean-spirited rhetoric. Now, some of those folks, they are irredeemable, but thankfully they are not American.
What do you think when you hear that?
She probably shouldn't have said it.
Do you think it's true?
I mean, it's probably not how I would say it, but, there are things that I would say, I probably would say what I said earlier, in the interview about the force of, and as I've been saying this probably since as long as we've been talking, but I'm not, I just want to be clear about something. I shouldn't be running for president of the United States.
Debating to find truth. Of course he wasn't debating to find the truth. He was doing politics. He was trying to persuade people. And I've watched on our side, not opportunistic engagement, but a lot of, I would say, counterproductive disengagement.
The other side of the story about like writing people off that I find to be so silly, because this is like intra-liberal conversations taking place. But like, there is also a level of punishment that liberals issue their own popular politicians that like Republicans simply don't. When a Republican says black people are violent, you're fucking writing off all black people, okay? There is no expectation from a Republican politician to actually go back on that. As a matter of fact, many people go, no, hell yeah, say more of it, King. Like, that's literally a writing off of a significant chunk of the fucking population. That's 13%. Like, at least with Hillary Clinton, when she's saying that thing that Ta-Nehisi says she shouldn't have said as someone running for office, she's writing people off of ideals that they represent and not like some other inalienable trait or characteristic. Racism is not like an unchanging quality.
But would you like to see one of us put up a sign outside of, say, some white evangelical church in Alabama, debate me on abortion, and then use that content to say such and such smashes, church parishioner here, such and such owns church parishioner?
I would like to see.
Would you like
I would like to see people on
our
our side. Yeah, go to evangelical churches, go to places that feel unfriendly, have conversations, and look. I put things up on YouTube. They're fairly successful, not the best of the business. And I don't use, capital letters destroys in them. I think you can do it more aligned to hopefully our value structure, our political approach, our political aesthetic, at least the one that I believe in. I shouldn't overuse the term our here. But we weren't doing that either.
Bro, he wants destiny. That's what he wants. That's what he wants.
No, we weren't. I know, for instance, I have. Like, I know, for instance, I don't know if it's on YouTube anymore, but I received an invitation, for instance, I think about when I went up to West Point and I had to go there and talk about Between the World and Me. I had to challenge them very, very directly about what it meant to have, at that time, Confederate memorials up there and to, talk about, a Confederate, I can't remember, what the motto is exactly, but basically it's an argument against lying and what it meant, to have that there and have those grand historical lies. I mean, we had a really, really great interaction. I don't know that, I know everybody didn't agree with me. It would never occur to me, and I think it actually insults the dialogue to take that and say, Ta-Nehisi owns West Point cadets.
You
Ta-Nehisi
really not
smashes.
recognize the kind of culture I'm talking about here? Like, really?
I'm sorry, say more. No,
That's also not the same, because like the comparison that Ezra Klein presents once again is a conflation of ideals, ideology, and characteristics that are unchanging. Okay? Blackness and the concept of being black is not a quality that you can wash off, is not a quality that you can change about yourself, whereas being an evangelical who believes that abortion is murder is a quality that you can reason with or potentially change the minds of people on. This is a fundamental asymmetry that exists in this left-right dynamic that I fucking despise. Do you understand? Like, Charlie Kirk wasn't bad because he was just saying that, like, his economic worldview was about, like, I don't know, deregulation and more deregulation and more tax breaks for the wealthy. That wasn't the bad aspect of his doing politics the right way. The bad aspect of it was he would just consistently churn out propaganda that dehumanized marginalized populations, dehumanized people who were just like basically not white and not Christian men. Okay, that's what it is. And this was conducted on prosecuting inalienable characteristics of people and demanding that the government actually do violence to these people on that same virtue or justify the violence that exists. It's very different than just like dunking on an evangelical over their understanding of abortion.
I mean, what do you mean?
I think there really was a move towards the sort of approach Clinton is offering here. I think we began to pull back. I really do.
But maybe it would help if you define
I will
we.
define the we,
Like,
right?
seriously,
Because I actually think this is a
help.
very hard thing about talking about political parties,
Right.
because they're diffuse,
Right.
right? It's a lot of people doing a lot of things all at once. But I think of the huge backlash to Bernie Sanders for going on Joe Rogan's show because Rogan was transphobic, right? Such a big backlash that when I defended him, I became myself a Twitter trending topic.
Right.
To Elizabeth Warren for going on Bill Maher's show. Bill Maher's Islamophobic, right? There were protests at Netflix when they brought on Dave Chappelle, right? I think there was a politics of content moderation that took hold that was more about enforcing boundaries of what, were and were not ideas we should be engaged with than about engaging with them, again, even if opportunistically. And when I go back to something I was saying to you a minute ago, I am in a process right now thinking we failed, right? We lost. The loss is having terrible consequences. What do we need to rethink? How do we become competitive again in places where we're not? And I think there is something in here. Do people feel like even if they...
We are competitive. Once again, his examples that he presented are not even ones that I disagree with. You should go on any and every platform as long as you can be consistent and clear with your vision. I don't disagree with this. And I think the content moderation aspect of this is silly. It's fruitless. It's annoying. It pisses even your own allies off. The problem, of course, is that I was never the guy who was like, how dare Bernie talk to Joe Rogan? I was the guy yelling at the fucking liberals for doing that. I've never been the guy who's like, well, the Bernie bros. I was the Bernie bro. So it's not even something to quote. That's crazy. Bastardizing the Mark Fisher quote to talk about the inability of Democrats winning fucking red states is crazy. Okay, let's just continue.
For Arkansas. And I think that's a problem.
Yeah. So I think a couple things about that. First of all, I just want to bring in the
okay, everybody. One thing that you fundamentally misunderstand about Ezra Klein liberalism, is that in many ways he's actually not dissimilar to the way that Destiny presents himself, even though Destiny is a fucking mercenary. He doesn't really give a shit about anything. But for Ezra Klein, the epitome is letting the Democratic Party win. When he says, oh, we have to let the Democratic Party win, we have to do anything in our power to let the Democratic Party win. What he's trying to say is, because when the Democratic Party wins, and I'm sure he'll explain it in a second to Thomas and Codes, it's still better than when the Republicans win. Okay? That's what his argument is. So everything that actually plays a role in undermining the chances of the Democrats winning is actually wrong and bad. If the Democrats are going further and further to the right, at least they're not going to be as bad as the Republicans are. Power players within the Democratic Party, the expansion of the tent only goes in the rightward direction. They do not want to expand the tent even from the rightward direction, with considerations of the economic harm that all Americans are experiencing. Okay? Because I have no issue with making Republicans, former Republicans, racist Republicans, vote for the Democratic Party. As a matter of fact, I want them to vote for whatever the left position party is in this country. That is how you win. The problem is, you don't get them to vote for the left flank of the party by becoming more racist. You get them to vote for the left flank party by offering them things that they want. And for a lot of Americans, for a lot of Democrats, especially for a lot of liberals, they think, no, we can't do that. We just must not do that. We must not ever consider that. That is crazy to me. Of course we want fucking racists and transphobes to no longer be racist or transphobic. But if in the absence of that, we want them to still not vote for the racist and transphobic party. And the way to do that is not by becoming the lighter version of the racist and transphobic party. The way to do that is by offering them shit that they Did you already cover the peace deal? Yes. And by the way, if you are a subscriber to the Hasanabi broadcast, which is still 35% off as long as you give 5 subs plus, you can actually rewind. The rewind functionality exists. So subscribe to the Piker Broadcasting Service. If you subscribe, then you can utilize the rewind function. If you give subs, other people can also become subscribers and utilize the rewind function. Hopefully, there will be less people asking, wait, did you cover this or did you cover that? It doesn't work on mobile, yes. But if you're subscribed, you can use it on the desktop. Yeah. And then maybe with 950,000 more subs, maybe we can break Kai Cenat's 1 million subscriber record. Tamaya! Thank you for the 20 big ones. Caked up bot. All right. Speaking of Israel behavior, Cornell is canceling a distinguished professor's classes on Gaza because of complaints of a student who previously served in Israel's military surveillance agency, Unit 8200, and was literally recording the comments of other students in class and deliberately derailing discussion. Early last semester, Druby says students began approaching Chaffetz with complaints that a graduate student in a Gaza indigeneity resistance class appeared to be recording them, possibly to gather their names and comments and intimidate them. We believe that a student came to the course for the sole reason of surveilling and potentially harming students in that class. Druby said that ended up proving itself to be true because multiple students came forward and shared their concerns with Professor Chaffetz. Chaffetz said one Palestinian student quit the class after telling him she felt upset and frightened. According to Chaffetz, the graduate student often steered conversations away from the assigned readings, which at that point mostly focused on the definitions of genocide and international law and on indigenous rights, to defend Israel's conduct in the war in Gaza and argue with others in the class. He clearly had not done the readings, Chaffetz said. It was disruptive. It's like the fucking pro-Israel gray names in my chat, but in real life. People who are pro-Israel are so psychotic that they just like behave as though they're anonymous gray names, but in real life, in a fucking classroom. Students taking a class on Palestine caught a literal spy from Israel's Unit 8200 snooping around and surveilling them, so naturally Cornell responded exactly how you'd expect. They canceled the class, accused the Jewish professor of anti-Semitism, and suspended him from teaching. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, the professor who was teaching the class on the genocide in Gaza was Jewish. According to Chaffetz, the graduate student often steered conversation. Chaffetz said he met with the graduate student in late January and spoke to him about concerns from his classmate. During the conversation, he asked the graduate student to drop the course, and by the next class, he did. Chaffetz said. The graduate student, Oren Renard, a PhD candidate in computer science whose identity was confirmed by other students in the class, previously served in Israel's elite military surveillance agency, Unit 8200, according to his LinkedIn profile. This is a perfect distillation of the way that these institutes of higher learning behave. They will literally suspend the Jewish professor speaking truthfully about genocide at the behest of a fucking IDF intelligence guy who is there to openly disrupt the fucking classroom. At Cornell, the dean broke policy and ignored the disciplinary committee's findings that there wasn't enough evidence of discrimination and forwarded the complaint to the provost anyway. The provost then opened an investigation. Pretty notable that senior Cornell officials refused to comment for the story, and the student, aka former member of Israeli military intelligence, refused to allow the tapes he had made to be heard by reporters. Maybe because they aren't so damning after all. Cornell's president, who has precisely zero scholarly expertise in the area, has previously remarked that the course takes a radical, factually inaccurate, and biased view of the formation of the state of Israel and the ongoing conflict. What will it take for America to say, God damn, dude, we got to fucking rid ourselves of this level of like surveillance from a foreign fucking apparatus in our institutes of higher learning? Probably not. It's just never going to happen. Not only is this like fake anti-Semitism smear bullshit, and it ends up literally getting a fucking Jewish professor suspended, it also leans into all of the anti-Semitic conspiracies. It at least makes my job a lot fucking harder when people come in and be like, Hassan, you mean the Jews don't control the media and all of the fucking formative apparatus of intelligentsia? Look at this. And it's like I have to explain to them that, well, the professor is fucking Jewish. Clearly, this is not a monolithic concept. Whenever Israel does some fuck shit like this, or an Israeli citizen does some fuck shit like this, just close your eyes and imagine what the American government's response would be if they were Russian. What the American government's response would be if they were Chinese. What the American government's response would be if they were Iranian. We do untold amounts of pain and shit to people that aren't even doing this at the behest of a foreign intelligence apparatus, simply on the virtue of their citizenship. We already suspect people of doing this when they're not even doing this. But meanwhile, Israel literally does this. They do it all the fucking time, and not a single American in a position of power goes, this is fucked up. I mean, it's the same, like, yeah, this is exactly what I was going to point to. Like, these guys are, Benjamin Netanyahu literally stood in front of American Christian and American Jewish Republican influencers and straight up said, we are doing a propaganda push for Israel. It is awesome that we are actually making sure that TikTok is sold to a pro-Israel person. It was a real problem for us. It's the most important weapon. It's the most important weapon that we have at our disposal. Can you imagine Xi Jinping doing that with a bunch of like Chinese American nationals and then people like myself? You know what I mean? Just being like, it's so sick. We got TikTok. We're never selling it. We are going to literally win this war of people's conscience. Can you imagine on U.S. soil? We'd be fucking nuking the Three Gorges Dam the next day. What the fuck? In any case, this is a correct position on it. I'm not even going to watch this cringe-ass fucking video, but actually, you know what? Fucking, let's watch it. This is like some of the Israeli Hasbara that's come out in the aftermath of that meeting.
Imagine supporting people who start wars just to lose the wars so they can cry about it and then try it all again.
You must see anti-Semites are literally obsessed with Jews. Now walk with me. While you must see anti-Semites are stacking eviction notices, Jews are out here stacking up businesses.
Jews control all the industries. Maybe if you spent more time taking notes from successful people, you wouldn't have to spend your nights and weekends spreading hate from your anonymous account with...
Oh my God. This is like... Oh my God. Bro. Are they trying to make people more anti-Semitic? Is that what's going on? Oh my God. Jews are your landlords. You know, when you get evicted, remember, it's a Jew that evicted you, I say, as a Jewish person who is defending Israel in this conversation somehow. That is fucking insane. What is that? Why are you universalizing anti-Semitism this way? By talking to a nation that is like crippled economically and being like, yeah, one of the worst things in your life is that your landlords keep raising the price of rent. Now think of your landlord as a Jewish person. Doesn't matter if they're not. You should just start assuming that they're Jewish. Cool. This is a way to basically make people go, I didn't even care about Israel, but I hate Jews now. Like, what the fuck? Who is this for?
an anime profile picture.
Do you work as hard as Jews? Do you network like Jews? No, because you're too busy cheering on a group of musty terrorists who smell like dirty earring backs. And if we're gonna keep it real, you're really mad because your income is giving side hustle.
Period.
How you gonna hate from outside, Shabbat? You can't even get in.
Wow. I want to know if there's one single guy that watched this and was like, "Oh my God, you're so right. I think Israel is doing a genocide, but it's awesome now." I certainly don't believe in the anti-Semitic conspiracies that Jews are a monolithic force that control both the media and now also all of the banking and finance and is my landlord. That's or rather, I agree with you. That is the case, and I like it. Like, this doesn't make any sense. Who would watch this and turn around and be like, well, you know, all of the anti-Semitic conspiracies that you guys advanced here are actually true, and I'm going to reconsider now. I think it's a good thing that it's happening. Didn't you debate her? Yes, this is the famous lady that I fucking, the lady that I yelled at famously, where I was like, that I said, do you not understand the English language? The lady that Speed unfollowed as well. Also, there's more news in terms of Israel's grand ambition to put the toothpaste back in the fucking tube. New, Israel is paying Trump's former campaign manager, Brad Parscale, $6 million to create websites and content designed to train AI models like ChatGPT with pro-Israel messaging. Israel wants to train ChatGPT to be more pro-Israel. Hell yeah, dude. As a part of the $6 million contract, Parscale will also work to integrate pro-Israel messaging into Salem Media Network channels, which includes shows like The Hugh Hewitt Show, The Charlie Kirk Show, and The Right View with Laura Trump. Fucking awesome. I'm glad that they have more money that they can waste on shit like this because we got their defense locked down. You know, we will always and forever defend them. We are attached to the fucking hip. Anyway, there is one last thing that I do want to talk about with respect to Israel. Obviously, it's the Ta-Nehisi Coates interview with Ezra Klein. That was a huge one.
There are two things that are true.
And this is going to be mind-melting and mind-bending. It's not just Israel, of course. They're obviously going to talk about their Charlie Kirk disagreement as well. This is that's at least like the main centerpiece of this conversation. It's basically liberalism meeting like the notion that like liberalism is simply a political project that will constantly fucking write off marginalized populations, meeting a singular person who is from a marginalized background, being a Black American, and going, hey, you can't write me off. What do you mean you want to write me off in an effort to win favor because you think that in the aftermath of writing me and others like me off, that we will still have a better future for people like myself? So let's take a look. This is, of course, Ezra Klein, who I used to say jokingly friend of the show, Ezra Klein, with actual friend of the show, Ta-Nehisi Coates, duking it out.
True about what President Donald Trump said at Charlie Kirk's memorial service.
He did not hate his opponents. He wanted the best for them. That's where I disagreed with Charlie.
One is that it's frightening to see the President of the United States talk this way about his political foes.
I hate my opponent, and I don't want the best for them. I'm sorry.
The other, I think, is that it's an opportunity. I don't think that is a strong politics. And for me, one of the central questions animating the show this year, that has been animating it since the election, is how did we get here? How did we let these people get back into power? What went wrong in our approach to politics that we ended up here? This has been a conversation I've been engaged in since Charlie Kirk's murder. And I wanted to have it with somebody who has maybe not liked the way I've been approaching it. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a writer I admire, somebody I have a genuine friendship with. In the days after Kirk's murder, he published a piece in Vanity Fair, pretty harshly
fucking torched his ass, okay? It was excellent. It was an excellent piece. I personally loved it. I read it on the broadcast. I couldn't believe it. And it was well deserved. Okay. I'll keep it a $150. It was well deserved because Ta-Nehisi is also like, in some ways, I would say like the former Ezra Klein, and he's the Ezra Klein of the Obama admin. Like the figure that Ezra Klein is. Actually, I feel like I'm disrespecting him by saying that. But like Ta-Nehisi Coates now is a different person than the former Ta-Nehisi Coates. Now, of course, when it comes to identifying white supremacy and Black liberation and Black liberatory struggle, like he was excellent. He's an excellent writer, but he has been in the past, I think, in the past, he had some ideological weaknesses that he himself recognizes, especially about Israel, which was a major awakening for him. And I think he still has some, liberal tendencies. But at the very least, is like his understanding of like the colonial violence that Israel was subjecting the Palestinians to, when he saw it with his own two eyes, truly made him understandably reconsider how he had spoken about Israel prior to that moment, with no benefit to his social pedigree, no benefit to his social standing, but only repercussions, as a matter of fact. So I thought that it was great for him to right that wrong. In any case, let's take a look at this conversation.
Article of what I had written. He compared what I was doing there to the whitewashing of the Southern cause after the Civil War. I think it would be the height of hypocrisy for me to say we need to reach across divides and disagreement and then not talk across my own. So I wanted to talk to Ta-Nehisi about the piece, about the aftermath of Kirk's murder, but also about a disagreement, or a question at least, that I think is about more than Kirk. I think there's something very unsettled in the sort of broad coalition of the left around the work of politics, around who we talk to and when and how. When is that work moral? When is it necessary? When is it a betrayal? As always, my email, EzraKleinShow@nytimes.com. Ta-Nehisi Coates, welcome back to the show.
Thanks. I don't know what number time this is.
I think you're one of the. If you go back to the Vox days, I think you're one of the. You're on the leaderboard for sure.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you, man.
Good to be here, Ezra. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's jump into the disagreement. You wrote a column responding to my column on Charlie Kirk.
Which is so uncomfortable.
It's okay. What was your disagreement with what I wrote after Kirk was assassinated?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to thank you for having me. You know, I know that I've had to read things about myself that, criticize my work. It's never easy. And people often have a very, very different response than the one you had, which is to invite me here and to talk it out. So I appreciate that. I want to say that up front. I felt that when I initially read the column, and I guess we should be fully transparent here and say there was a discussion between us privately before there was a public thing.
Yeah, we text.
Yeah, we did. We do text regularly, and we did text about this. So I felt like, having not done the research that I eventually did for the college, there was something off about what I knew about this guy. And the presentation of him as, and I don't want to misquote you here, but as basically a paragon of politics and how
Doing politics the right way, Ezra
politics
said.
should be done. So I think I had the same reaction that most ordinary people would have, which is absolute horror at the idea that this guy was somewhere speaking and was killed. But I always think it's important to differentiate how people die versus how they live. And then after doing the research, I had to be honest with you. That's when it got really, really difficult. When I went past my initial impressions and started going through all of the clips of the things he said, the way he talked about people, the way he, described groups in ways that, honestly, even as I was writing it, I was uncomfortable saying. And so the idea that this guy should be in any way celebrated for how he conducted politics, the fact that he just slurred across the board, all sorts of groups of people, and then ran an organization wherein, which appeared to me just a haven of hatred. I would not want that to be a model for my politics. And I know, as we talked between us, that, you are not attempting to make a statement for the entirety of it. But I guess I feel like at a certain point, somebody's legacy, or somebody does something that is so large, that it's tough to think about their legacy and take that out of it. And that's how I felt about it.
So I think I want to get at the right level of disagreement here. So I think one thing for me is that, I don't know, for me, the immediate hours after somebody is murdered in public, when you see that sort of grief and horror pouring out of the people who loved him, and many people loved him, my instinct then is to just sit with them in their grief, right? To say, I can, for this moment, find some way to grieve with you, to see your friend the way, or in some version of the way you saw him, right? That's not my view of, the person's whole legacy, but going to people when they're grieving like that and saying, listen, I want to tell you really what I thought of your friend. Just feels like not what you do in a kind of a community. I can see people coming down on both sides of that.
I mean, my mind immediately rushes to Ghassan Kanafani, right? Would would Ezra Klein reflect on his legacy and this is not a moral equivocation between a prominent critic of Israel who never famously took up arms, but was simply a writer and an organizer who was assassinated by the state of Israel. Like, I just don't think that someone like Ezra Klein would say that about him. I don't think he would say that about David Duke either. Yeah. Not to say that, like, that's even a better example, because, like, David Duke obviously is a far more overtly reactionary than Charlie Kirk, but I just don't think Ezra Klein would revel in the grief that other people are experiencing.
I actually think that actually is a great impulse, that after somebody's been killed, and not just killed, but because we live in the media environment that we live in, that it's seen and that it will live forever, and that person's family, you know what I mean?
That is being looped in front of all of us.
Jesus Christ.
Which I think has a lot to do with how this was taken.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. And to have to go, like, to have young kids who have to grow up knowing that is a thing that exists in the world. You know what I mean?
And I'll go one step further on this. One thing I wrote about in that piece that I do worry about is I worry we are already in a cycle of political violence, of mimetic violence. I think about Pelosi. I think about Shapiro. I think about the near assassination on Trump. I think about when after that happened, I thought about me. I thought about you. I thought about all kinds of people I know, right? So I do think there's just something about when violence takes hold that like, that there's something about it that it begins to breach all lines.
Yeah. So
anyway,
I guess
that's part of my reaction too.
I think all of that is understandable, but I guess, was silence not an option?
Yeah, silence to me was not grieving with people. I felt it was important as someone who is liberal, as someone who has a voice, that there are moments.
I don't think you have to be silent in that moment. It's a profoundly important incident that took place. It's a political violence, a political assassination that took place of a prominent advisor to Donald Trump. You don't have to be silenced. I think the problem is that it was actually what Ezra Klein chose to omit from the piece that was the issue, and how he chose to present a truly whitewashed reputation laundering initiative of Charlie Kirk that was the issue. That was the real issue, because, hagiography, exactly. Because saying that he was practicing politics the right way basically means, like, the SJW dunk compilations that are purely cut for propaganda on college campuses are actually a profoundly important fixture of American politics, no matter how racist the positioning is. And that, to me, is ridiculous. That's not, like, that's crazy, man. What are we doing? That's all this is.
It's like that. Like, I really do feel, that's funny because you said something like this in your piece, but it was a little bit more offhanded, that political violence like that is an attack on us all.
Right.
And that in that moment it creates, for me, even if it's very temporary, that it's important in a moment like that to sort of, come together to try to see other people in their...
I think I might have SJW. Should I get diagnosed? No. The woke mind virus. Let it take over your brain.
Grief, to try to cool things down just a little bit. I guess, given everything you read that Charlie Kirk said, and we probably don't have very different views on the value of the things he said, why do you think he was winning?
I mean, that's not really hard for me to understand. I mean, if I could just back up for a second, I want to say two things. I published a book 10 years ago, Between the World and Me. And one of the constant reactions to that was that it was overly pessimistic about this country. It was overly pessimistic about the future. Why are you so dark, Ta-Nehisi? Why can't you give us any sense of hope? And the reason I would always say is because any sort of sober examination of the history of this country says that those of us who believe in equality, those of us who believe in respecting the humanity of our neighbors and of everyone, that we're up against some really, really powerful forces of history and powerful narratives. And the implication of that is, however good we felt in 2013, 14, 15, 2008, there will be backlash. People, those of us who were crying in 2008 watching Obama, give that speech, those of us who were so moved by watching him and Michelle step outside the car and felt so much fear for him, and then when nothing happened, felt so great about that. Those of us who believed that seeing a Black family in the White House mirroring what, some of us felt the best of us was, the best that we had to offer, there are other people watching that too. You know what I mean? And I don't take any joy in saying this, but we sometimes soothe ourselves by pointing out that love, acceptance, warmth, that these are powerful forces. I believe they are. I also believe hate is a powerful force. I believe it's a powerful, powerful unifying force. And I think Charlie Kirk was a hate monger. You know, I really need to say this over and over again. I have a politic that rejects violence, that rejects political violence. I take no joy in the killing of anyone, no matter what they said. But if you ask me what the truth of his life was, you know, the truth of his public life, I would have to tell you it's hate. I would tell you, I'd have to tell you it is the usage of hate and the harnessing of hate towards political ends.
Then let me flip that question actually a bit. Why are we losing?
We're losing because there are always moments when we lose.
See, that feels very fatalistic to me.
It doesn't feel fatalistic to me. It feels like the truth. I mean, and let me express what I mean. I'm Ta-Nehisi Coates. I'm the writer. I'm the individual, right? But I am part of something larger, and I've always felt myself as part of something larger.
I think the notion that in order for Democrats to win, they have to expand the tent is true on its face. The problem is, for Ezra Klein and for numerous other